actually wanted to start with the weird one today. The one that I wouldn't typically do. Since we're going from celebrity drama, we get into drama between 90s musicians. I think this is a really interesting conversation to have. Not just because this is like two famous bands or whatever, but this is, I think, a turning point in American pop culture. We have like Guns N' Roses, which is sort of representative of rock music leading up to Nirvana. And a lot of people see Nirvana as like a turning point, the birth of a certain kind of alternative music, and they're bigger like as what they represent than just their music itself. Like, and while people will often put their music at the top of like any list or whatever, it's I think it's more of a movement than that's much bigger than the actual people involved. So I think this story is going to be really interesting. It's one that I've wanted to know more about. I was saving this because I thought this one would be fun to do on stream. So I'm curious about this. And I guess wear your biases on your sleeve. I'm not really a big Guns N' Roses person, but I'm not like a Nirvana fanboy by any means, but I think my music that I'm into leans towards like the alternative thing and kind of more the Kurt Cobain aesthetic too, if we're just talking about like style and like what they represent or whatever. I think Kurt Cobain is closer to what I'm into than Axl. So I think if you have a bias, you should just let people know that out front, because I'm probably going to be giving some opinions throughout this. So let the world know your biases.
Guns N' Roses and Nirvana were without a doubt some of the biggest bands in the early 90s. Both groups released their second LPs 1 week apart in late 1991 on the same label, Geffen Records. Guns N' Roses dropped their highly anticipated double album Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 on September 17th, while Nirvana's Nevermind came out the following week. Guns N' Roses albums would take the number 1 and 2 spots on the Billboard charts, while Nirvana, who was still fairly unknown at the time, wouldn't top the Billboard album charts until January of 1992, when they displaced Michael Jackson.
Hi, Rachel.
One person who counted himself an early fan of Nirvana was Guns N' Roses frontman Axl Rose. In fact, he stressed in interviews that he was excited about alternative rock and didn't see it as a threat to his band. During the making of the band's video for Don't Cry
and Axl Rose, his interpretation on rock music is kind of going to go away or fade deeply into the background for a long time. I'd say that like the flash that came from what's my favorite Nirvana song? Probably like Come As You Are. I'm basic. I love that one though. That's a fantastic song. I'm really big into their live album too. I thought that was an absolutely brilliant one. But Come As You Are, probably. Oh, Heart Shaped Box. No, I like Heart Shaped Box more, probably. But like Axl Rose, his kind of music is sort of going to fade into the background. They had a lot of pop. They were very there was a sort of performative nature of rock music that sort of started to fade away with the Nirvana wave, which they're sort of just like they're just dudes. They're just ordinary dudes up on stage, and yeah, they do drugs and whatever, but like they don't feel like, it doesn't feel like there's this huge gulf between you and Kurt Cobain. It feels like there's ordinary people. Like, while a lot of the rock beforehand, the musicians would be they would present themselves as more larger than life. And I don't think Axl Rose is as guilty of that as some other bands, if you want to call it guilty. I think it's a perfectly valid form of performance. Whatever.
1991, Axl can be seen wearing a Nirvana hat and a Red Hot Chili Pepper shirt. In the actual music video, you can see a Nirvana hat and Axl wearing a Jane's Addiction shirt. In fact, when guitarist Izzy Stradlin quit the band, Jane's Addiction guitarist Dave Navarro was offered the chance to fill in for him, but he was so deep in the throes of addiction that he never showed up for rehearsals. There were even some paparazzi photos of Axl wearing a Nirvana hat in Ireland in the spring of 1992 when the band played Slane Castle. Rose would be interviewed by Metallics in late 1991 and was asked which bands he'd like to see cover Guns N' Roses, and he responded saying the following: "I'd like to hear Nirvana do Welcome to the Jungle. That's what I'd like to hear. I'd like to hear Nirvana do Jungle their way."
That'd be weird.
It initially seemed like Axl and Nirvana frontman Kurt Cobain had a lot in common. Both came from small towns, they grew up in broken homes, and turned to rock music to get through life. But Cobain couldn't stand Guns N' Roses. Even ahead of Nevermind's release, Cobain gave numerous interviews slamming the band, telling Big O in February of 1991, "I think Guns N' Roses are promoting the wrong values, like sexism, and the way they do drugs. I mean, what are they rebelling against? I don't think this is rebellion. Rebellion is standing up to people like Guns N' Roses," he'd say.
That's interesting. I don't know exactly what... I don't know if he elaborated on this or not, but that's very interesting. Okay, I get why Nirvana, they were sort of ahead of their time in some ways. Like the 90s was incredibly sexist, incredibly like homophobic and whatever. I'm pretty sure that Nirvana didn't really have those problems. I'm pretty sure Guns N' Roses did have those problems. And there's also some issues surrounding some racist lyrics, I believe. Let me look this up real quick while it's on my mind so I don't miss it. It's Guns N' Roses. I'm going to type a racial slur probably. There it is. Oh, the song is called One in a Million. This is like a weird song. I'm pulling it up on Genius right now, so I'm gonna have a racial slur on screen for a moment here. Bear with me. Here it is. Guess I needed... I'm not going to read the word. Guess I needed some time to get away. I needed some peace of mind. Some peace of mind that'll stay. So I thumbed it down to the 6th in LA. Maybe a Greyhound could be my way. This next part. Police and N-words. That's right. Get out of my way. Don't need to buy none of your gold chains today. These are some unfortunate lyrics. I don't think anybody's putting this song on a greatest hits album for Guns N' Roses, and they use all sorts of like slurs that I'd imagine the Nirvana people were being a little bit more progressive for their time probably wouldn't be cool with. And it's amazing that I know that song, because as like not that big of a Guns N' Roses person, it's not like I sought it out because I was like looking for reasons to dislike Guns N' Roses. I have no reason to want to dislike Guns N' Roses, but I would say look up the song. It's very much real. So it's gonna be hard not to side with Nirvana after bringing that up, but let's judge this feud in a bubble, I suppose.
1 month after Nevermind came out, Nirvana would be performing at the Palace Theater in Los Angeles, and in attendance that night was Geffen president Eddie Rosenblatt and Axl Rose. Nirvana manager Danny Goldberg would recall in his book, backstage afterwards, Eddie Rosenblatt told me that he had...
Sorry, I couldn't focus because I was thinking about this. Is it weird that it feels more like the police and N-words part? That's one thing. For some reason, the second part, not wanting to buy your gold chains today, for some reason that felt more racist. I don't know why. Maybe it feels like it's because like there are people who have ignorantly thrown around the N-word like idiots a million times before, but like don't want to buy your gold chains today, like seems like overtly like reducing black people to this like weird stereotype. It's almost like I've heard a lot of people who have said the N-word, but I think they were possibly able to... Oh wait, I need to get the React screen back up. I've seen a lot of people who have like ignorantly said the N-word, but like I think a lot of them still have the ability to come back around and sort of realize, hey, I was wrong or whatever. That's a really messed up specific image to have. I don't know. It just, yeah, it's the 1-2 combo for me. Yeah, I guess. Like they're both bad, but it really elevates the awfulness of it. I believe later Guns N' Roses apologized for some of their songs from the 80s and 90s. Well, of course they did. And you know, I've listened to a lot of musicians who've said some unfortunate stuff. Like I listened to Eminem a lot growing up. I'm not gonna it's some of his older songs don't hit the same way they used to, but for some reason it felt like it was okay back then, but it was never okay. It just definitely didn't age well. Yeah, it didn't age well. Yeah. It's kind of like, do you give people a chance to grow? I'd say yes. Like, if people seem sincere in their growth, I think they can get over any words. Words are temporary. People can change beyond words. So I'm hoping that they sincerely changed, and not just because people called them out on it, you know? There we go.
Was Geffen president Eddie Rosenblatt and Axl Rose. Nirvana manager Danny Goldberg would recall in his book, backstage afterwards, Eddie Rosenblatt told me that he had come with Axl Rose and asked if he could bring him into the dressing room to say hi to Kurt. When I conveyed this request, Kurt grimaced and said he really didn't want to meet the Guns N' Roses singer. I didn't want to put Geffen's president in an untenable situation, so I suggested to Kurt that he and I leave the dressing room, and then I'd give Rosenblatt a couple of passes. That way it wouldn't be like we were excluding them, just that Kurt couldn't be found. Prior to the feud erupting, Axl could see how alternative rock was changing things in the music landscape, as he told an audience during a concert in Phoenix, Arizona in February of 1992.
You ever been let down by, I don't know, family, friends, something you wanted, or maybe just life in general? You know the mood I'm talking about when like, something you like, maybe your friends are over and something you like comes on TV. Something you like, but you don't care because you're just not in the mood. It doesn't matter. You've been let down. I mean, it's kind of like this band Nirvana, why this Teenage Spirit, why this song's such a success. People relate to being let down.
It was during the same month that Rose allegedly asked Nirvana to perform at his birthday party, something that the band turned down, according to their manager Danny Goldberg.
So one could say that the Nirvana guys were not necessarily playing nice, but there's also the thing, like, if you morally object to somebody, you're not very likely to play nice with them. Like, if I found out, if like somebody who like a public figure that I was really not a fan of, turns out like, hey, they really like your videos or whatever, which, you know, is not a thing. None of them like my videos. I'm certain of that. I'm not obligated to be nice to them because like I have like major disagreements with this or that, and I don't really want to be friendly with somebody who's like that. Like that's also totally valid. They're not obligated to be friendly with the Guns N' Roses guys just because they're fans of their music. Like, it's like any other fan. You're not obligated to play at his birthday party. You don't have to be associated with him publicly. So far, leaning Nirvana, you know? Feeling all right about it. Thanks, Rachel, for rejoining the bourgeoisie. becoming a channel member. And if anybody else wants to become a channel member, I try to get out a new members only video every week, and you get your face in the crawl below. Let's continue.
This would only escalate from there. As Nirvana became more popular, they also did a lot more press. Promoting Nevermind in 1991, Kurt made some more disparaging remarks against Guns N' Roses, telling Seconds, "We're not your typical Guns N' Roses type of band that has absolutely nothing to say." By the summer of 1992, it was
I mean, they have something to say. You might not like it. I think this also comes from a sort of alternative elitism. I listen to a lot of punk music, and it's weird. There's also, with like punk people being sort of outcasts, people on the outside, it does sometimes create a certain elitism, like they're too cool to enjoy some things that other people enjoy. It's not like the Nirvana people are looking at this stuff and it's like, hey, the music doesn't speak to me. They're straight up like, this doesn't even have value, which it's okay to have objections to somebody's music, but I'm sure that Guns N' Roses did have something to say. But like, it seems though, it seems like this is sort of like that alternative elitism where it's like, you're not rebelling in a way that I find. Yeah, hipsterism. Yeah, Nick. Yeah, it's kind of hipstery. They do that sometimes. They can be sort of hipstery.
announced that Guns N' Roses would
Being a hipster is not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. It could be used for good or evil.
be doing a co-headlining tour with Metallica across North America. Axl wanted Nirvana to open the tour, something that their drummer Dave Grohl would recall years later, saying, and I quote, "Axl had been calling Kurt nonstop. One day we're walking through an airport and Kurt says,
Well, that just sounds annoying.
Axl won't stop calling me." In a recent interview with Metallica guitarist Kirk Hammett, he would recall trying to get Nirvana to come on the tour, telling Revolver magazine, "I remember having to call Kurt up because
Get off the keyboard.
we wanted Nirvana to open up the Guns N' Roses Metallica tour. This came down to me.
That probably would have been a fire tour, too.
We've talked to Nirvana's management. They've told us no. Kurt doesn't want to do it because he doesn't want to be affiliated with Guns N' Roses. He doesn't approve of Axl's behavior. A long laundry list of stuff, and it's all about Guns N' Roses and Axl. It has nothing to do with Metallica. They love Metallica, he'd recall. Looking back, Nirvana probably was happy they turned down the tour, as Axl would frequently show up late to gigs, he'd walk off stage, cancel gigs due to his throat problems, and of course there was the riot in Montreal. By late 1992, Cobain gave an interview to The Advocate, an LGBTQ publication, where he blasted Rose, saying he was, and I quote, "an effing sexist, a racist, and a homophobe, and you can't be on his side and be on our side. I'm sorry."
Well, there you go. He's not saying anything that isn't true there, or at least wasn't true at a point. And the fact that he's giving an interview, being as popular as Nirvana was at the time, and giving a interview to a gay publication, that's something there. That's like, just because you give an interview to a publication doesn't mean that it's that you're endorsing it. Not by any means, but even allowing yourself to be associated with that's pretty big for the 90s. I'm just saying, the 90s were really homophobic. Shout out to Mark. Mark, I'm just gonna read your name as it is. Mark Afkaba.
That I have to divide this up like this, but it's something you can't ignore, and besides, they can't write good music. By the late summer of 1992, Courtney Love and Kurt Cobain gave the infamous interview to Vanity Fair, which documented Love's drug use during her pregnancy. It resulted in the couple almost losing custody of their child, something that Rose would pounce on during a concert in Orlando, Florida on September 2nd, 1992, as he said here.
We've had our share of problems with...
So I don't know where he's going here, but before I hear him say it, I assume he's going to condemn the drug issues during her pregnancy, and that's a bad thing. If you're incapable of staying off the drugs while you're pregnant, it's probably wise that you terminate that pregnancy and wait for a time where you feel more capable of, doing that thing. I know, like, plenty of people object to abortion. So, you know, that is what it is. But like, if so, that's extra motivation to take some extra steps to work on yourself. But it's also hard. But I also have to make this point here. As far as Axl goes, do you think he'd say anything about this if Nirvana had played nice with him from the beginning? Like, if they played nice from the very beginning, do you think he'd just let this go? Like, I have a feeling that if they were playing nice, he probably just wouldn't have commented on it, even if he objected to it. But I don't know, maybe this would have been the straw that breaks the camel's back for him, and maybe he'd, like, have the moral high ground in this situation. Possible.
So-called alternative bands. What is this word? I mean, I didn't find myself using it. Alternative. Like someone who leads an alternative lifestyle. All I know is that when Guns N' Roses started, ain't no radio stations wanted to play our shit either. Ain't no radio stations wanted to play Metallica. So I think we have the world's biggest alternative crowd here tonight. I think that the problem starts when you start thinking that you're different from everybody else on the planet. You may be a little different in what you're doing or how you're going about doing it, but I got a good feeling that you're probably a human.
So far, I'm not opposed to anything he says. I think that's a good point for like people with that sort of hipster tendency. It's good to look at them and be like, okay, you're not better than everyone. Maybe you should bring yourself back down to earth a little bit.
Right? You're probably a human being. And so right now, alternative, only thing that means to me is someone like Kurt Cobain in Nirvana, who basically is with a junkie wife. And if the baby's born deformed, I think they both ought to go to prison. That's my feeling.
Yeah, I don't think he'd say that if they were playing nice. Like, maybe he genuinely believes it. But, like, also, it might not be fair to say he would have said this and so maybe I shouldn't. Now, I'll leave that one alone. Like, I would say he sort of... I don't know if he necessarily has the moral high ground. Because I don't think his opinion in this situation is all that important. But I'm not gonna condemn what he says, because obviously you've got an obligation that's bigger than yourself at that point. So his point has some merit to it, of course. So yeah, I'm willing to give him some stuff, even though I've clearly walked into it with a Nirvana bias. I'll give him something.
And he's too good and too cool to bring his rock and roll to you. Because the majority of you, he doesn't like or want to play to or even have you like his music. It seems to be a general feeling among a lot of alternative bands that they don't want the majority of people even liking them. They like it on the outside.
Everything.
That's an interesting observation there, because there's a grain of truth there. There's a sort of like outside elitism, and I've already sort of commented on that. There are, yeah, that's a total hipster tendency. Did he actually pronounce Nirvana as like Savannah? Yeah, I know a lot of people who pronounce it Nirvana. I don't know. Like, everybody seems... most people seem to agree that it is Nirvana, but every once in a while you catch that. I don't know where Axl Rose is from. That's... Axl Rose. Where are you from, Axl? Oh, he's from California. I don't know. I don't know why he pronounces that way. I was about to like defend it because it was like some sort of a southernism maybe. but it doesn't appear to be the case.
Thing would come to a head a week later on September 9th at the MTV Video Music Awards in Los Angeles. It was an event that would see both Nirvana and Guns N' Roses perform. That night, Guns N' Roses were set to perform November Rain with Axl's childhood hero Elton John. Ahead of the band's performance, Kurt would admit, as reported by Loudersound, "I spat on Axl's keyboard. It was either that or beat him up. We're down on this platform that brought us up hydraulically. I saw his piano there, and I just had to take this opportunity and spit big goobers all over his keyboard." It turned out that Kurt would end up spitting all over Elton John's piano and was horrified when he learned that.
Oh no, he spat on... No, you don't mess with Sir Elton John. Oh no. Indiana, I thought. Is he from Indiana? Did I read the wrong thing? I think it said he was originally from California. But maybe he spent a good amount of his life somewhere else. I don't know. Born in Indiana. It says origin California. So there you go. Born in Indiana. Give him that. I don't know if something about having parents from Indiana would have something to do with that accent. I don't know how people from Indiana talk. But yeah, don't spit on Sir Elton John's piano, especially if you have a problem with somebody being a homophobe. Don't spit on one of the biggest gay icons of it. Gay icons. Sorry, I'm just thinking of the singer Akon now. Gay icons of a generation, and don't spit on his computer. Also, it's all very petty. Obviously, it's all very petty. This is clearly a feud that doesn't really need to happen.
Backstage, things escalated pretty quickly as Axl would spot Kurt, with the Nirvana frontman recalling,
"You know, yesterday, my wife and I were sitting in a tent at the MTV Music Awards, and we're having lunch, and Axl Rose walked by us, and we yelled at Axl. We said, 'Axl, will you be the godfather of our child?' And he said," he stopped, he turned around, he pointed his finger at my wife.
His bodyguard.
Yeah, well, he had like 20 bodyguards with him, and he's doing the Madonna documentary. He's got his little film camera with him.
And you had a 3-week-old baby in your arms.
And I had a little helpless child in my arms. And so he said to my wife, "You better shut up, bitch. Don't bitch me any shit tonight." Because tonight was obviously the highlight of his career. And then he looked at me and he said, "You better keep your wife shut, or I'm gonna take you to the pavement."
Take you to the pavement.
What?
He even like does tough guy-isms, sort of like a dad. But I'd imagine that's a product of like what felt cool to his generation when he grew up. Like that kind of tough guy-ness. I think Kurt is sort of coming from a philosophy that sort of laughs off that sort of tough guy fronting, you know. So that sort of stuff, unless he's actually going to back that stuff up, it probably doesn't really faze somebody like Kurt Cobain, because that's just what people like him do. They sort of just laugh things off when people are like acting hyper masculine or whatever, because it just comes off as sort of silly.
What? What are you gonna do? You're gonna beat me up? And he said, "You better keep your wife's mouth shut. You embarrass everybody. You embarrass your wife, you embarrass your old man, you embarrass me." And then I was shaking and I said, "I told my wife to shut up, bitch."
The same night, Nirvana would perform their single Lithium, and towards the end of the performance, drummer Dave Grohl would poke fun at Axl, as you can see here. Backstage, other members of Guns N' Roses and Nirvana got involved in the feud, as bassist Duff McKagan confronted Chris Novoselic, But before anything got physical, security got involved. McKagan and guitarist Gilby Clarke would shake.
Nobody's like nothing comes up involving like Slash, because it seems like Slash had nothing to do with a lot of the other stuff going on in the band. I know the relationship was not always good. I don't know when it turned sour with Slash and Axl or whatever, but it seems like he had nothing to do with it.
One of Nirvana's trailers, where Kurt's baby Frances Bean was in. Amy Finnerty, who worked at MTV at the time and who discovered Nirvana for the network, threatened to call security, and the Guns N' Roses members ran away. Slash, for his part, claimed he didn't have any animosity towards Nirvana and wasn't involved in the altercation backstage, saying, and I quote, "I don't have time for this shit." McKagan...
He seems like he's got a good head on his shoulders. That's one thing that people seem to agree with when it comes to Slash. This is why we need to bring back duels. On guard. Yes, I agree. If they just settled it in a duel, it would have been done way faster. I don't know.
would look back at this moment in his life, recalling Kim Fastback warned,
"Sell duels on pay-per-view."
my mentor called me the day after my embarrassment and scolded me for it. I felt so low. We had so many things in common. We have so many things in common today, he'd say. The following day, Nirvana...
Slash was the most normal one, if you can call it that. He had seemingly a good head on his shoulders. Normal's an interesting word, because yeah, he did have like one of the most extravagant appearances out of anybody, one of the most iconic appearances, and you would think he'd be a little bit out there. He just seems kind of chill. You know, I like the idea of Slash.
Nirvana talked to the media, giving their
version
of
he was born in the
events,
UK, I guess.
but Guns N' Roses did the talking from the stage. At a September 13th show, 4 days after the VMAs in Toronto, Canada, Axl once again blasted Nirvana on stage and burnt that cap of his that you saw in the Don't Cry video and the paparazzi photos I showed earlier.
I get this on film tonight. This is a band of a bunch of who think they're the only fucking world.
Dude, this could have been stopped at like any turn.
It's not working, guys.
I'm glad this isn't like a rap beef. Despite the jokes about dueling, I'm glad this isn't like a rap beef where somebody gets shot at the end, because like I would have felt really, well, oh god, but like not involved. It wasn't related to like the, I don't mean to make a joke about that. That wasn't intended. But yeah. Like that's uber petty. All that needed to happen is that one person had to decide to not say anything. Fire hazard.
By the end of 1992, things seemed to simmer down in the press, with a few interviews mentioning the feud. Guns N' Roses drummer Matt Sorum would tell Raw magazine in 1993, "That little punk," referring to Cobain, "We did nothing but treat those guys effing good. We asked them to tour with us, we talked good stuff about them in the press, Axl even wore their effing hat. But they basically slag us off everywhere they go, including the MTV Awards. We had a little row backstage, and Duff almost kicked the bass player's ass, and I was ready to help him. I mean, they have some good songs, though they're not a great band, but it's as if they don't want the fame. I don't understand, man," he'd say.
I don't... It's always so funny when people who are actively feuding talk about the quality of what the other person's putting out, because like it comes off as extra petty when they slip in, "They're not a great band." Because like who cares about your opinion right now? You are actively mad at them. You should probably refrain giving your opinion on music, because this isn't like a music thing. Well, I guess it's like a one-way music thing, because it doesn't seem that the Guns N' Roses guys, before this got started, had any beef with Nirvana over their music. It seems that Nirvana, Kurt Cobain, and I don't know if all the members of Nirvana are even in on this. It seems like at least two of them. The Nirvana people seem to have beef with the Guns N' Roses music. But it didn't seem like it came from the other direction until after they were already fighting. So bitter feelings. You'll find a reason to hate their music.
Days before the Nirvana frontman was found dead in his home, Cobain was on a flight from LA to Seattle, and sitting next to him was Duff McKagan.
Rolling Stone would publish that the musicians discussed rehab and addiction, and they discussed mutual friends they shared, with Duff recalling, "We were talking about what it feels like to be going back home. That's what he said he was doing, going home. Once they got to Seattle, the pair went to baggage claim, and McKagan noticed Cobain was feeling down and thought about offering the frontman to stay at his house, but he quickly disappeared before he could talk to him."
On April 5th, 1994, Cobain would be found dead in his Seattle home. Years later, while promoting Foo Fighters on Jon Stewart's Daily Show, Grohl would reveal how Matt Sorum was one of the first people to express his condolences, telling the late night host, "After Kurt died, one of the first phone calls I got was from Matt Sorum. He left a message and said, 'Man, I'm really sorry, and I hope you're doing well.' I thought that was really cool," he'd say.
I hope that's one of those moments where like Axl and everybody involved would look at it and be like, yeah, life is too short. Clearly, life is too short for this stuff.
In the book Everybody Loves Our Town, Bryn Breidenthal, who worked in PR for Geffen Records, recalled breaking the news of Kurt's death to Axl Rose, revealing, "The first thing I did when I got back to my hotel room was to call Axl because I was afraid of how the news might impact him. He was such an emotional roller coaster. I was afraid that Axl would hurt himself. He felt things really deep and felt a real connection there, even though there was no connection from the other side. I think he had a lot of empathy for Kurt. I was on the phone with Axl until about 3 o'clock in the morning," she'd remember. Fast forward now to 2010, and Duff McKagan was working as a guest columnist for his hometown paper, the Seattle Weekly. He would write a column apologizing to Chris Novoselic for his behavior at the 1992 VMAs, writing, "I blew my lid when I perceived a slander toward my band from the Nirvana camp. My drunken haze and my drug-induced mania, I heard what I wanted to hear, and I went after Chris Novoselic backstage. I had no control of myself then, and Chris, I'm sorry for that day." The same year, Dave Grohl, Slash, and Duff would join Lemmy at the Revolver Golden God Awards.
Oh, that's
perform the
nice.
classic Motorhead tune Ace of Spades. The same year, Grohl would guest star in Slash's solo album along with McKagan on the instrumental track Watch This. Fast forward to 2016, and Guns N' Roses' reunion of Slash, Duff, and Axl was about to kick off. During the band's first gig at the Troubadour, Axl would break his foot, jeopardizing the rest of their planned stadium tour. Rather than rescheduling dates, Grohl lent the band a throne that he himself had used the previous year after he fell off stage.
Oh, I knew
and broke
about
his leg in
this.
Sweden. Since then, Axl,
That's
Slash,
pretty
and
cool.
Duff have joined Foo Fighters on stage in Italy, performing the song It's So Easy. While Grohl has appeared on stage with Guns N' Roses several times performing their set closer Paradise City, Axl would end up thanking Grohl for his kind gesture by buying him a guitar, as Grohl would reveal to Classic Rock magazine, saying, "He had Slash go pick me up a guitar, and he picked me up an early 60s Gibson ES335 Dot, which to this day is the nicest effing guitar I've ever played in my life. It was an incredibly kind and classy gesture, and I was very appreciative," he'd say. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe. We'll see you again at Rock Culture Stories.
So, before we move on to the next thing, I guess final thoughts on that. It's like I said, it's bigger than the two bands involved. While the conflict it's hard to find where the petty personal stuff and the philosophical differences around music were different. I think if podcasts were around at the time, we'd probably have a much better idea, because you get Kurt Cobain on like the Joe Rogan Experience, get him talking for 3 hours, he'd probably had a lot of depth to go into on this stuff. But like a lot of his critiques of Guns N' Roses came off as sort of shallow, and I'm not necessarily diminishing their value. It's just he did not go into great depth as to what they lacked in his music and what they needed to do better. That's just the thing. I find that really interesting though, because music after that, it shifted away from a kind of showmanship that Guns N' Roses had, and it felt like from that point on, in a lot of rock music particularly, you started seeing people on stage that looked more like ordinary people. which, you know, that's nice and all. But then we see, like, whenever we see like extravagant performances now from musicians, they feel like the outlier. And before, during like the period that inspired bands like Guns N' Roses, that was kind of the norm of popular rock music. It had sort of gotten away from the most rebellious roots and kept sort of a sound to it, but was so I suppose in a lot of ways friendly for a general audience, though Guns N' Roses may not be the best example of that given the lyrics that we read earlier in this stream. So whatever. So that was fun. That was very interesting. I would love to do some more history of like art and music and stuff like that, because that's an interesting clash of philosophies there. I only wish we had more like of their opinions on this stuff, because I would love to see greater depth into like that philosophical debate over music.